Hello, good afternoon, and good morning to those of you who are joining from the West Coast. Welcome to our weekly installment of the TeamOhana webinars. Really glad that you're joining us today. My name is Virginia Highland. I'm our head of solutions engineering here at TeamOhana. And I spend my days working with HR, talent, and finance leaders at companies that are growing fast and trying to keep their headcount plan under control while we do it. So, the focus of today's webinar is going to be on from order taker to advisor, how HR and talent can get ahead of the business. Actually, today we're going to be talking a lot about my customer's customer, the business leader. I work a lot with HRBPs, talent operations, and heads of talent and people organizations. But who I don't get to talk to a lot day to day is really their customers being the head of engineering, the CRO, all of the different business leaders who actually have to be the decision point makers around where they're going to hire and how they're going to structure their headcount plan. Yeah, that's what we're going to talk about today. And we're going to talk about some of the challenges that I see and then how we can help simplify those challenges. With terms of the agenda here, we're going to start by talking just about a brief overview of the current state of relationships between HRBPs, talent operations, and the business leaders they support. And then we'll get into a product demo of TeamOhana to help understand how the systems and tools can help improve the working relationship between HR and their business counterparts that they exist to serve. As always in our webinars, please feel free to check out the resources tab in the Zoom link to additional resources, and feel free to use the chat to ask questions, and I will try to address them at the end as long as we have time. So let's get into it. I want to start off by just thinking about the types of leaders you're supporting. So really, the underlying idea behind today's session is that the HRBP function and the TA ops function is to support their business counterparts. Depending on your role within the HRBP function or TA ops, you might be working directly with hiring managers or all the way up to executive leadership. I know that the mandate for HR is very broad, but given TeamOhana's focus is on headcount planning and management, that's really going to be the focus of this session. So looking at how HRBPs and TA ops can best support these business partners when it comes to planning and executing on the headcount plan. Okay, so let's dive deeper into this customer. So I know I mentioned already, there's definitely different functions within the business that you serve. A head of engineering might need something different than a head of sales who's thinking about their headcount plan in terms of how they can hit quota. But I want to start by looking at just the different types of business leaders on a spectrum of experience. So not all leaders are created equal. On one hand, you've got what I would call the experienced builder on the right-hand side there. So you can think of this as maybe a CTO who's scaled 3 engineering organizations before. So they've done this before. They know what they're doing when it comes to planning headcount. Or a CRO who can walk into a room and just tell you off the top of their head exactly how many AEs they know they're going to need in order to hit quota. They're so used to calculating ramp time that it's really not that difficult for them once they know what their quota is going to be. And as well, they'll also have their idea of what the right SDR to AE ratio is. So these are the types of experienced leaders. They know their domain. They've built before. They don't necessarily need you to explain headcount planning to them. Although even that will be changing soon. You should keep an eye out because Tushar will have some webinars coming up about how the agentic workforce will change how headcount planning works, even for pros. But barring that, these leaders, they don't really need as much day-to-day guidance, but what they need is speed and accuracy in the data. So they'll come with questions, with more specific questions like the one in the example there. They're going to be doing what some people call horse trading on their own, managing their own plan. They're also the leader who's probably more likely to start their own spreadsheet off to the side. Maybe you've given them the cut of the approved headcount plan that was initially approved at the beginning of the year. Now they've taken that spreadsheet, made a bunch of changes that they're not always keeping everyone aware of. And they want answers quickly. So they want to know where they're at with hiring and making sure that they're on track with their plan. On the other hand, you have your, what I heard a VP of people call recently baby directors, or the first time leader. So these are strong individual contributors, promoted quickly, who are now suddenly managing a team for the first time. And I know this was me a few years ago, at a company where I was promoted into a manager for the first time. I was verbally told that I had approval to hire another SE, if I wanted one. And there was no clear guidance on one, how to determine if my team really did need to grow right now. So I spent a lot of time counting AE heads in the org chart and asking questions about what the plan was for sales, team growth overall. And I also didn't know even how to get the ball rolling with talent if I decided we did. So where was the formal proof that I had that headcount approved? And then how would I show talent that I was ready to start hiring? So new leaders like this do require a lot more guidance, and they might be delegated authority, like I was, by a VP to kick off hiring, but they still might not necessarily know exactly how that process will work and where even to get started. So these leaders tend to need a bit more of a guide. So then just thinking about kind of what these different leaders need when it comes to headcount planning. Your experienced leaders are looking more for a thought partner. Oops, sorry. A thought partner who knows their org well. So someone who really understands what's going on with a head of engineering's headcount plan and can say things like, you want five senior engineers in Q2, but if you look at our average time to fill for TA, that level is 90 days, and your recruiter already has three recs open. So, is it really realistic for you to expect to have all five of those senior butts in seat, or should we maybe plan to ramp up hiring in a later quarter? And then for them, when we think about what they might want from a headcount tool, they really thrive with self-serve live visibility. So these are people who are familiar with their plan and what they're trying to do, and they just want to have a sense for what's actually happening. Is recruiting hitting my headcount target? And if they're being held to a strict budget, they want to know if they're still within budget or not. So one leader told us recently that they're giving their VPs or their executives targets to hit. So they're given a budget, but then just in a spreadsheet, and they're not given any visibility into their updated forecast or not on any regular basis. So it's hard for them to track towards that target, towards that budget, when they don't know where they're at and they don't know if they're at risk of going over or not. These more experienced leaders are also looking for scenario planning. So they want to be able to play around with their plan and understand if they change things, how does that impact who they're going to have in seat and when? And again, how does that tie back to a budget? And then they start asking questions like, what happened and what changed with my plan? So a full audit trail is really helpful for them in order to understand how they started with a headcount plan of 50 heads and now they've gone up to 75. And then junior leaders, they need a little bit more guidance when it comes to actually building out their plan. So someone who can help them really think about org design and org shape. Does it really make sense to hire 12 more ICs and no managers when you might be at risk of overloading an existing manager? And also for them, a system can really help by giving them a clear place to go for requesting approvals and then giving them clear visibility into what's allowed. The system will tell them what they're allowed to request, what they're not, and then what approval flows those different requests need to go through. So, for example, they can clearly see when a backfill may or may not be eligible. So, at the end of the day, both of these types of leaders don't know, both of these types of leaders need a business partner that can get them information quickly about their headcount plan that is accurate and up to date. So, a lot of the customers that we work with are typically working off a spreadsheet that's approved at the beginning of the year and quickly falls out of date. And when TA or HR is asked a question by the business, they have to go speak to a recruiter, pull data from an ATS, pull data from the HRIS, just to reconcile everything and understand where you're actually at in your hiring plan and if you're on track or not. And so leaders are really looking for a simpler view into what's happening. And if not, simply faster answers from TA and HR, then somewhere they can actually go in and see the plan for themselves. And that's where TeamOhana can come in to help. It's not that TA and HR are not responsive. They certainly are, and they answer questions as quickly as they can. They're just limited by the tools that they have to work with. So, like I mentioned, you have that spreadsheet that TA Ops is probably maintaining once a month for finance, maybe the best source of truth that you have. With a tool like TeamOhana, I'll show you how we can pull all of that into one place so that you can collaborate with leaders directly in a tool. So that gets us into the demo. I'm going to show you three things in the demo today. First is how TeamOhana can become that single source of truth for your headcount plan. So HRBPs and TA Ops can spend less time reconciling data and more time supporting the business and becoming those strategic advisors, gleaning insights from the data rather than just trying to pull it all together. Two, how TeamOhana can actually become a self-serve tool for business leaders so they can just request backfills and do scenario plannings themselves or with minimal intervention from the HR team. And then giving them self-serve, the number three, self-serve visibility into targets and forecasts. So looking at more of like a financial view of their headcount plan. So with that, let's jump into the demo here. Okay. So I'm going to start with the one thing that sits at the center of all of those challenges that I just described. The fact that most teams have, if not one master headcount plan that sits in a spreadsheet somewhere, they might have multiple. Finance might maintain a plan in their FP&A tool. HR and TA are working together to maintain their own version of that plan. And then, depending how much self-serve visibility you give business leaders today, there could be 20 different versions of the plan floating around for engineering, sales, G&A, marketing. If you're giving leaders visibility, we're all familiar, spreadsheets don't have user access controls. So that's where you start to see sort of branching off of that master spreadsheet into what can become quite a mess to manage. So TeamOhana's headcount ledger takes care of all of that, giving you and your leaders visibility into a clear view of the plan, where you started at the beginning of the year, where you're currently at, so how many button seat employees you have, and then where you're going towards for the end of the year. So what your forecasted headcount is. So this is all user access controlled. So rather than breaking up a spreadsheet into 20 different pieces to give business partners visibility, you can just assign them the right access, whether they're a division leader who needs to see the head count for multiple departments, or they're a department lead who just needs to see the head count within their own department. You can control all of that using TeamOhana. And it's also updated and reconciled live in real time. So let's look at that in more detail here. So our current headcount, our button seat employees, this is being fed directly from your HRIS. So TeamOhana integrates with all of your common HRISs, Workday, HiBob, UKG, Bamboo, HR, and more. And we take in a feed typically every 4 hours to refresh your live employee data. From that feed, we're also capturing any leavers, so your terminations here, and any joiners in hires, and reconciling that with data from your ATS. So TeamOhana also integrates with your ATS, whether that's Greenhouse, Ashby, or other ATSs out there. As soon as a candidate accepts an offer in your ATS, they're marked as hired, and then we make sure they also come through on your HRIS. So this is how you get that one live view of the plan. And then coming over on the right here, you have your to be hire heads. So this is really where TeamOhana specializes in execution. This is your live approved headcount plan. So we can see here line by line all of the individual headcounts that are part of our hiring plan for the year. So now we're moving the team out of spreadsheets into one live, automatically reconciled platform. So if a head of engineering comes to you and says, are we on track to hit our headcount forecast by the end of the year? You can easily see what that forecasted headcount is. And if you are an HR or TA ops, a member who supports multiple teams, you can easily filter down by the one team that you're supporting and see the data that way. Next, I want to look at the recruiting workboard. So this is looking at all of your approved headcount. Each one has their own unique headcount ID and will live in your recruiting workboard. And really, this is the TA ops team's home base. So up at the top, you have the different stages of all of your different headcount, and all of your approved roles will live in one of these buckets. Now, the piece that I really want to highlight here is ready to hire. This is a piece that most TA ops teams really love because it gives them control and helps them prioritize with the business to say which roles do we want to prioritize hiring for next once we have recruiter capacity. So if you think about the beginning of the year, you have this whole headcount plan and ambitious goals to hire throughout the year. But realistically, you're not going to be able to just go and recruit for every single role in the plan all at once. You're going to have to figure out how that plan is going to be split throughout the year. And in TeamOhana, you can work directly with business leaders to set priorities on the different headcount. We'll also tell you realistic target start dates and then what the corresponding target hire and open dates should be. So these are helpful pieces for you to help prioritize those roles. But ultimately, ready to hire gives the TA team the ultimate control to say, of these not started headcounts, these are the ones that we want to make sure that we are focusing on hiring next. So this can be really helpful for if you think about a head of sales who comes to you every single week and says, hey, in order to hit quota, I need to make sure that I'm hiring 20 AEs this quarter. Let's start recruiting for 5 more AEs. Well, is it really realistic for you to begin add those extra 5 heads if you already have 26 heads in progress? This gives them that live visibility to say, okay, we actually already are recruiting for 26 heads here, and I've got these 12 lined up in my queue. When recruiting has capacity, I know exactly which heads are going to go into the pipeline. So they can see, is it account executives, is it account sales managers, is it SMB executives versus mid-market, enterprise, and so on. So they can understand directly what everyone has agreed is the next prioritization for hiring. And then from here, you can actually create jobs and openings in your ATS. So in this case, it's in Greenhouse directly from TeamOhana. So this is just a helpful time-saving piece for TA ops or the TA team recruiters, rather than having to pour all this information from the headcount plan into Greenhouse and set it up manually. You can automate the creation of jobs and openings directly. So that's the recruiter and TA ops view. So saving you time as well. So again, you can focus on more strategic work. I do want to take another look at another view of the hiring plan here. This is the hiring tracker. And this is a view that your business counterparts would be looking at. This would be the main view that they would be interested in because up at the top here, you can see it gives them visibility into their plan progress. So if you imagine again, that head of sales who's very anxiously trying to make sure that they hit their hiring targets for the year, they can quickly see how many headcount they've hired of their total goal. They can filter by year. We can break this down by quarter, however they want to look at their plan. And then they can see again a status of where each headcount is at in the hiring pipeline. And with that integration to Greenhouse, as candidates are moved from in progress to offer stage. So when an offer is sent, that will be updated as well. And then as soon as the candidate accepts an offer, they'll show up as hired. So all of that's happening and automated in real time. So I always get a clear view of my headcount plan. And then on the right-hand side here, we'll give headcount signals that are very important to the leaders. So flagging things like how many critical headcounts they have, which headcounts they've marked as critical priority. So leaders can actually manage their priority directly, and then flagging things like which headcount are at risk of being hired late. So helping them stay proactive in their hiring life cycle as well. Now let's talk about something that happens all the time with hiring plans. They change. You might start recruiting for a role, and a leader might realize, oh, actually, this is supposed to be, or based on the candidates we're finding, I actually want to up level this role, or I need to move locations. That with Team Ohana, that's really easy for them to do. So they can come into any given headcount and simply submit a change request. So if it's just a one-off change, they can put it through a request process and send that out for approval. And here I can clearly see who's next in line in that approval process. So I always know where a particular change is sitting. But beyond just those one-off changes, which are really easy to do, let's say I want to actually do some scenario modeling and make a couple of different changes to the plan in order to understand how that's going to impact my forecasted spend. So I can do that using scenarios. Scenarios takes a live snapshot of your headcount plan and brings it into a sandbox environment. So, and most of our customers will do this in one of two ways. For your more experienced people leaders, they might be comfortable doing the scenario modeling themselves directly in TeamOhana, whereas for your more junior leaders who we talked about earlier, they might do the scenario planning in partnership with a finance business partner and an HRBP who can really guide them in the org planning process. But in this scenario, you can see here as an example, I've added a number of additional draft headcounts. And by adding these draft headcounts, I can see how that's going to impact my total forecast. So I've increased adding these headcounts. My fiscal year cost has increased my forecast by 896K. And if I want to look at that annualized cost to understand the total year impact of each of these heads, I can see it here. So let's look at a few examples of the different things we can do in scenario modeling. So let's say that I have a product designer and I want to up level this role. So I can move this role that's currently at an IC1 and 95K to an IC4 role. And now this compensation has moved up to 180K. And I'll update my calculation and we can see that we've increased my overall annualized cost by up leveling that role. And then let's say that I want to change maybe this headcount that's 215K in Seattle. Maybe I'll move them to a lower cost location. We're doing the currency conversion for you here so that when I update my cost, we can see that ultimately this is decreased by changing that role. And if I come into the changes here, you'll see each of the headcounts where I've made those changes. So where I moved that role from an IC1 to an IC4 and where I moved the location from Seattle to India. So this makes it really easy. Typically, if you don't have a tool like TeamOhana, your leaders are either just asking questions in a box over Slack or email, and it's the HRBP or the FB finance business partner's job to go and figure out if the change requests that they're suggesting are actually going to fit within the budget or not, or they're working with their finance business partners to get a spreadsheet pulled together in order to do this type of horse trading. And depending how fast your team is growing, we've seen that certain leaders, especially in engineering and sales, can actually spend a lot of their week making these types of changes. So Team Ohana makes it really easy, especially because we integrate with your job catalog in order for them to model out these changes in a sandbox environment, understand what that's going to do to the forecast. And then if they're happy with the changes that they've made, they can go ahead and put that scenario through for approval so that we can keep a complete audit trail on who's approved the headcount and when and what the changes to the plan were. So you can always come back and audit in the future. And then one final note on our scenario modeling here is sometimes for smaller changes or depending on what you're doing. So if you're building out a team for the first time, for example, you can also scenario model in a headcount view. So we have this org chart view where users can drag and drop headcount and rearrange how they want to build out a headcount model so they can see how the org structure is changing as they add or change new headcount. All right. So the last piece that I want to look into is the variance tracker. So the variance tracker is a very helpful view if your business partners have a budget that they need to be very conscientious of. Because the variance tracker is how they're going to get visibility into what their total budget is and where they're forecasting to land. So in this case, I can see that my total budget was 191 million. My total forecast for this year is coming in at 188. So my total budget variance is 3 million. So this is a very quick way for me to check, am I over or under budget? Is there room in the budget for me to make some changes to the plan based on what's happening in the business? And just a quick note here, you can do this both by dollars, but also by the number of heads. So depending on how your team plans today, whether they're really focused on dollars or whether they're just focused on setting a budgeted number of headcount, you can look at it both ways. And then coming down and breaking this down, we can see what that budget is in dollars by division. So for our HRBPs and our TA ops folks on the call, if you're supporting multiple divisions or multiple budgets, or sorry, multiple departments, you'll be able to see how each of them is progressing against their own individual budget here as well. And then finally, we can also see what's driving this budget variance for my team. So coming down here, I have my new hire budget variance. That's highlighting for me where I have saved money due to late hiring, so pushing out start dates or lower pay. And then where I have increased my spend due to earlier hiring, so pulling start dates forward or higher pay. So maybe sending out an offer that is over the average or the midpoint of our compensation band. And then I can click into any of these for further details. So if I want to see which headcount specifically within what divisions or what departments I'm paying higher than the plan or the approved plan, I can come in and see each of these headcounts and their division and all of the details related to what's causing the variance. I do want to end on one final piece here, which is our recipes. So some of you may have joined our webinar a few weeks ago where we went through recipes. But this is really a really helpful tool for HR and talent to have those conversations, especially with junior leaders who are less familiar with concepts like span of control. This recipe in particular is looking at span of exceptions both by division and then by individual manager level in order to flag for you where which managers have a healthy span of control, which ones might be underloaded, and then which are overloaded as well. And then looking not just at their current headcount management span of control, but also their forecasted status. So showing based on the planned headcounts that this manager is hiring, they might be forecasted to be under or overloaded. And all of the views and recipes are customizable, which makes it really helpful for you to sit with your business counterparts and understand maybe I have a head of engineering who is really married to their headcount report looking a certain way and being visualized in a certain way. Recipes would give you that complete flexibility in order to build out a similar view. The difference being that it's now updated and maintained and fully reconciled between your ATS and your HRIS. All right. So that wraps up our webinar today. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Hopefully, you took away something to get you thinking about how your business leaders interact with HR BPs and the TA Ops team, and really what business leaders are looking for when it comes to headcount planning and visibility. If any of this resonated with you, happy to talk more and dig deeper. And yeah, you can drop any questions in the chat and we can connect offline. Thanks for joining. Bye.